Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Converging Horizons podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Tan. Today, we will be diving into one of the most discussed and often misunderstood topics of global affairs, the Global South. The Global South refers to regions across Africa, Latin America, and much of Asia that have historically been experiencing high levels of poverty and disproportionately lacking resources, often being shaped by colonialism, unequal trade relations, and a legacy of exploitation. From the colonial scramble for Africa to Cold War proxy conflicts backed by the US and USSR, the developing world was frequently an arena for rivalry among the great powers of the 20th century. Today, it is again becoming a key battlefield in the US-China competition for national markets and global influence. So to explore this complex dynamic, I'm joined by two students bringing very different viewpoints, one from the US and one from China. Welcome to both of you, Anping and Kenny. Could you please introduce yourselves? We can start with you, Kenny.
Okay. So, hello everyone, and my name is Kenny, and I'm a second-year master student at Fudan University, and majoring in financial technology. And also, it's a great honor to be part of today's discussion, and I'm looking forward to hear different perspectives. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Anping?
Yeah, hi, I'm Anping. I'm a rising junior at Yale University, studying global affairs and economics and math, and excited to be here.
Thank you so much. So, can we have a virtual handshake? Awesome. We have a very interesting combination today. We have one hand from the north in China and one hand from the south in Africa. Okay, so as part of our tradition, let's play a quick round of rapid fire questions just to get to know you better and also, see if we have anything in common. So we can start with Anping. I'm going to ask you 5 really quick questions. You can just answer however you want. So first, could you name 2 or 3 names of people from the global south that you can think of right now?
Anyone in the global south?
Yeah.
I'm in Rwanda right now, so one of the clear figures is President Paul Kagame.
Okay.
Another figure I can think of, I was just reading an article on Ethiopian elections, so Abiy Ahmed, and then I guess Chinua Achebe. He's a famous author.
Nice. Okay. What is your favorite movie,
Favorite
if you had
movie?
to pick one?
My favorite movie would be, it's kind of cheesy, but Spirited Away, Studio Ghibli film, very
Really?
good.
Oh my
Yeah.
god, I love all the Ghibli movies. Wow. Okay. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book is Waiting for the Vote of the Wild Animals. It's a French book, but that's the English name of the title.
Nice. Do you have a favorite dessert?
Favorite dessert? I like fried pumpkin cakes. I think it's I think
Ooh.
it's a Chinese, but yeah, they're very good.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, do you have a favorite sport?
Probably soccer or football. Yeah,
Do you
I guess
play it
depending.
or do you like to watch?
I used to, but I do like watching it. Yes,
Nice. Okay. Yeah. It's the World Cup right now. Are you watching it?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Perfect. What about you, Kenny? Can you think of several names from the global south?
Well, maybe the first one is Gandhi, yeah, and
Mm.
also Mandela, yeah,
Yeah, of course.
yeah.
Okay. What is your favorite movie?
Well, honestly, favorite movie, I seldom watch movies. Maybe
Okay.
I would choose maybe the Zootopia. Yeah.
Yeah. We all watched it.
Yeah,
Do you have
yeah.
a favorite book?
Mm, maybe Harry Potter. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite dessert?
Favorite dessert, maybe the cheesecake. Yeah.
Uh,
Some sweet food. Yeah.
okay. And do you have a favorite sport?
Favorite sport, I also maybe soccer. Yeah.
Also soccer?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
So you guys
Yeah.
have something in common.
Yeah, yeah.
That's nice. Okay. Great. So now let's talk about personal experiences. So we're very excited to hear from you, Anping. Could you just share with us what research you're doing in Africa and, what sparked your interest in the global south?
Wow. Yeah, I'm in Rwanda right now. I'm doing econ research, development economics research in the capital Kigali of Rwanda. The project is specifically about product certification, so making sure that all the food that you're eating, from avocados to potato chips, are produced in a sanitary environment. It's a lot more complicated than it seems, but it's interesting research.
Nice.
I think what got me interested in the global south, I guess, was the internet. I mean, I watched a lot of YouTube documentaries when I was a kid, especially on conflicts on the African continent, especially. And I think it was just really interesting to me to see what was going on. I think it was just childhood curiosity, and it's been that ever since.
No. That, that's so fascinating. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I have two questions that I want to ask for Anping. And so the first one is, was there any moment in Rwanda that changed your understanding of development in a way that maybe books or news could not?
Any particular moment? I think that's I think the thing that stands out to me the most is
Mhm.
that is restaurants. So I think in the United States, it's very much restaurants are very quick. You know, they hand you the bill before you're even ready. Like it feels like they want you to get out of the restaurant all the time.
Okay.
In Rwanda, it's very different. I think it's the case in a lot of places in Africa for sure, but in the developing world in general, where service is very slow. And I think the focus, you can tell it's very much they're focused on making sure the food is cooked properly
Mm-hmm.
because I think their key constraint is that they don't want to waste food and they want the food to be good, whereas labor costs for them are much lower. Whereas in the US, the food value is very low compared to the cost of having like the waiters there. So
Mm-hmm.
in Africa, you always see like big empty restaurants with plenty of employees,
Mm-hmm.
but not a lot of food.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. And
Wow.
okay, so another question. So you said that you're tracking the Gango word that give you a very different picture from what it maybe mass media usually shows. So what's one thing that you wish more people to understand about this conflict?
Yeah, it's Kong conflict. It's very complicated, and I think people are quick to look for a easy perpetrator versus victim complex. I would say it's a very complex conflict, and specifically that a lot more attention should be paid to the current Congolese government and domestic politics in that country. And I think a lot of the conflict boils down to that rather than foreign intervention from any source.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing. I'm
Yeah.
also curious, when you first arrived in Rwanda, what was something that was the most like shocking or surprising to you?
Hmm. I think okay. This is actually the second time I've been to Rwanda. I came here 2 years
Okay.
ago with my family, but I would say the first thing when I came to Rwanda for the first time, that was my first time on the African continent at all. I think this is definitely a Rwanda thing, but in general on the African continent, you see it quite a bit. The security presence is very high. Rwanda is definitely like the place where I felt this absolute safest from like a
Whoa.
purely physical standpoint. There's very heavy like security apparatus everywhere, and there's some petty crime, but there is absolutely no violent crime in this country. So it's
Whoa.
that was I mean, I think you can hear about how clean a country is, but like until you're there, you don't realize like, wow, this place is very, very safe.
That's surprising. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what did you find the most challenging, whether it's throughout your stay or throughout your research there?
Challenging. I mean, it's, I would say as far as I think the African continent is in general, not there's a reason the tourism there is not that like common. There are many challenges. Rwanda is one of the places where it's much easier to just to live as like and as like as a tourist or not exact. Maybe I'm there for long enough that I'm not exactly a tourist, but definitely as a foreigner.
Yeah.
It's they make things relatively easy, you know, like there's with digital payments and all that type of stuff, it's very not that difficult to settle in, but I guess yeah, I don't know. I think I haven't been too many challenges to staying here. I guess other than you have to take a malaria
That's a
pill
good
every
thing.
morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta remember to take your malaria pill, but other than that, it's fine.
Okay, perfect. Okay, then I want to ask Kenny, what is your knowledge of the Global South and from where did you get this information?
Well, honestly, my understanding of the global south first may came from the idea of developing countries. So, at school,
Mm,
I learned about these countries through history or politics or economic development, or later it became more concrete to me because, China has built like more connections with these regions and through maybe the Build and the Roll initiative. So maybe most of my knowledge came from school, but also news and also some social media. Yeah, I think.
I
Mm.
see.
Yes,
Then for
I have
both
a
of you,
question.
yeah.
I have
Okay,
a
yeah.
question on when you say social media. I guess like I know the social media I see, there's a good
Mm.
amount of media produced in Africa by Africans in English, so I'm able to, understand and comprehend that. But when you say social media information about Africa, is it generally in the Chinese language? Is it produced by Chinese people visiting Africa, or are there a lot of Africans speaking Chinese, or maybe you're just interpreting whatever language they are speaking?
I mean, just our daily life use this social media, always Chinese apps, not or TikTok. Yeah, maybe this kind
Mhm.
of international apps. Yeah, but maybe we can only get some news translated in Chinese, but not some international. We can get all kinds of people, what they see, what they found, and yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then, for both of you, what are some other countries in the global south that you would like to visit?
Mm, you
I
first?
mean, yeah, I think one place I definitely want to go to is Ethiopia.
Oh,
Obviously, there's so much history, and it's a very beautiful country. It's unfortunately there's some political instability at the moment, and has been for a while. But I think sooner or later I want to go there. And then I think it would also be quite interesting to go to Madagascar, just because of how unique it is geographically and in terms of the ecosystem they have there.
Well,
okay, perfect.
okay.
What about
Okay.
you?
Well, for me, maybe I get a few informations for about this kind of global South countries. Maybe if I have the chance, maybe I love to visit maybe Indonesia or Brazil. Yeah, for
Mm,
Indonesia, it's close to China, and also I think plays a big role in Southeast Asia. And for Brazil, and I think it has a major country in Latin America, and it would maybe give me a very different view of maybe the development of outside Asia. Yeah.
perfect. Okay, so now let's start with perceptions because different countries have very different viewpoints. So,
Uh-huh.
Kenny, from what you have learned in school or seen in, like social media or the news, how do you describe your understanding of the US's role in developing countries? And also, just what do your Chinese peers often say about the US aids or loans in the global south?
Okay. Good questions. Well, I think the U.S. role in developing countries is really complicated. On the one hand, the U.S. has provided a lot of resources like aid for educational opportunities and also public health support that could not be denied. And also at the same time, the US is not viewed totally as a developed partner, that people always discuss how they use other methods or intervention or pressure to influence the policies or decisions of other states. Yeah, so I would say the US does have some capacities to provide resources or rules, but they often expect other countries to develop according to the rules defined by the US. Yeah.
I see. Then,
Yeah.
Anping, how accurate do you think that is? And if it's not accurate, what is reality actually like from your understanding?
I feel like that's a pretty good like overview of what U.S. development assistance, I guess, is, or our stance towards the global south, if you will. But I think, yeah, I think really it's very vague, it's very broad. I don't think we have like a defined stance towards the global south. I think really there is not a very concerted effort in any direction to do anything. I don't think we're very interested in making sure that development goes one way or another in general, to be honest. So yeah, I think it's hard to characterize our stance, but generally the idea that we're doing some things that are positive and some things that may or may not be helping other countries is, yeah, I mean, you can't really argue against that.
Okay.
I see. Then for you, Anping, what is the common narrative that you think people in the US, like what do they hear about China's role in the global south? With things like, the Belt and Road Initiative or that diplomacy or infrastructure projects?
Yeah, I think at least from when I did debate in high school, the Belt and Road Initiative was definitely like a very big, like two-sided coin. I'm not sure. I think in the US, obviously foreign policy is not, people aren't very informed on it in general, but of the people that are interested in the global south, the Belt and Road Initiative is very much a very polarizing topic. There's a lot of people that see it as very much a like a debt trap sort of policy, and a lot of people that would point to the fact that China is beating us in terms of building a lot of infrastructure that we're not doing. So yeah, I think it's hard to say what proportion of the population's on which side. I think there's also a significant proportion of people that are saying China's doing a lot, and even if they are like they might be debt trapping, they might buy both sides. But I think it's clear that China's doing a lot more than we are.
I see. Then Kenny, do you think that's accurate? And what is China's role actually like?
Yeah. Just what Anping said. Yeah. From my understanding, Chinese role mainly on maybe development oriented and more practical. Yeah, and China is not just giving aid; it's more focused on infrastructure and trade, investment, and also industrial cooperation. Yeah, like building roads, ports, or railways. So for many developing countries, I think China provides an alternative source of funding and partnership. Yeah.
Great. Then this is for both of you. What is one criticism of the other country's approach that you think is fair? And what is one that you think might be exaggerated or misunderstood?
You first.
My first? Okay.
You
Okay, I
first.
think one fear criticism of the U.S. is that maybe it sometimes judges developing countries too much through their own values or institutions. For example, the U.S. often maybe emphasize the democracy, human rights, transparency, and market rules, and they're also important, but different countries are at a very different stage of development. So one model maybe may not fit everyone. Yeah. And also, at the same time, I think it's exaggerate to say that everything the US does is simply just about control. Yeah, of course, US aid and security partnership are often connected to strategic interest, but in case like education, public health, the US had also provided just real support to local community. Yeah.
Yeah. I think on my end, I think one criticism I think is fair of Chinese policy, especially towards the global south, is that Chinese policies tends to be tailored towards governments and not local populations. I think China is very much willing to work with a government regardless of the nature of that government. And I think in many cases, this is it's much more flexible than the U.S. At least historically, the U.S. has had some, at least in the last couple of decades, had some requirements in terms of which regimes they want to work with and which they don't. Of course, there's many exceptions, but I think China broadly just doesn't really have a policy towards that. There's very little judgment towards governments, good or bad, and I think unfortunately there are many governments that are not acting in the best interests of their own populations, and I think Chinese intense partnerships with those governments may not always be the best in the long run for the people living there, even if they are beneficial in the short term for the governments there. And then I think on the other hand, one criticism that is pretty exaggerated is that of debt traps. I think Chinese policy, it may be reckless, but I don't think it is. I don't think there is an intentional scheme to put countries in debt. I haven't seen the evidence to back that up. I think more often than not, a lot of these countries that are falling into big debt problems are allegedly because of Chinese whatever debt traps. The issues are very their debts are not only towards China, and most like it's usually a plurality, if or even less. And there's plenty of countries that are in much more debt that are not because of China. And I think the debt trap specifically is over exaggerated.
Okay, so I see your point, but I also wonder, for for some large infrastructure projects, working with government, I think is also unavoidable. Yeah, so you think is the problem really that China works with governments, or that there's not enough mechanism to make sure that local communities benefit?
Yeah, I mean, I think my perception there is that it's you can put like a moral argument against it, but I think the fact is I think China is operating in its own best interest, which is completely
Hmm.
fair for China to be doing. But I think it's an important distinction to note that China is not intentionally one way or another operating in the better or worse interests of the people there. They're essentially blind towards what the effect of their actions is on the ground there, other than for the business interests of China, right? And I think that it's important to be aware of that if you are a citizen in an African country or an African government, either way, just to know that China is focused on. I think the U.S. is increasingly turning towards
Yeah,
this
I know
policy,
that.
just
Yeah.
focusing on itself. And that's what I would push back a little bit on when you said that the United States has very much pushing a pro-democracy agenda. I would say
Hmm.
at least, and in this current administration, but even in general, I think the United States has really not been that focused on on democracy and the values that it claims to espouse. I think there's a lot of rhetoric going in that direction, but if you look at U.S. actions, we are absolutely willing to work with regimes when it favors us. And I think, especially in this current administration, it's become clear that we are very much adopting China's policy of focusing on improving our own interests without any care for whether or not the government had matching values towards us. And you can argue that's good or bad, but I think it's a clear shift towards Chinese matching Chinese policy.
Okay, thanks for answering.
Great. I'm glad you're clearing some misunderstandings for each other. Okay, and going off of that, Anping, a common perception is that countries, they often use aid to exchange for control of, right now it's like strategic mineral resources like copper or cobalt or molybdenum, they're all important for the new AI era. So do you think this is like fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. Countries such as, especially like the DRC and Zambia, are very much leveraging the critical minerals they have in order to gain beneficial partnerships from the United States. I think you see much more focus on what the United States is doing right in this current administration, mainly because China did a lot of that stuff more than 10 years ago. So China already has such a massive lead in terms of both extraction and processing of so many critical minerals. So I don't think China's not making it like a new effort that is very
Mm,
widely publicized, whereas the Trump administration especially has focused on countries such as the DRC in terms of getting critical minerals. And in exchange, I think it's much less development aid or humanitarian aid. I think it's much more security assistance. I think it's very much it's becoming increasingly explicitly for things that the government wants rather than vaguely morally beneficial things such as development assistance or humanitarian aid, which in the first place were never that big.
right. Okay. Then speaking about this, let's talk a bit about collaboration. And because it's a big dilemma for the developing countries of how to get support without, having to choose a side. So I'm curious to find out for both of you, where do you agree on what the developing countries actually need the most? Whether like economically, culturally, or politically?
You fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that is at least from the perspective of the African continent is extremely necessary is increased intracontinental trade. I think
Mm,
that's very, very important for growing economies, especially a lot of African countries such as Rwanda, where I'm right now, are landlocked and do not have access to ports. And without access to ports, it's very, very difficult for a country to develop. So I think if you look at landlocked countries in Europe that have developed, it is because a lot of the reason is because they've had access to free trade with their neighbors. And I
right.
think, at least for Africa, free trade is something that they've been working on for a while, but accelerating that growth is very important for a lot of the developing economies.
Free
Well,
trade.
for me, yeah, I think the what developing countries need most is like the real opportunities to grow, not just for short-term aid. And like for economically, many countries need basic foundations for development, like infrastructure, electricity, and educational jobs. And culturally, maybe they need to be seen in a more equal way. The global south is often described through a poverty or conflict. But these countries also have their own cultures, young people's lifestyle, and also development stories. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think there has to be a new model for growth
Yeah.
that isn't just copying models of growth from either Europe or East Asia. I definitely think that the idea that African countries or countries in South America or Southeast Asia or whatever could just copy blueprint for blueprint the Japanese or Chinese model of like heavy
Mm,
manufacturing growth is just simply not possible in the world of AI, of the internet. So I think there definitely is a new model that has to be found, one that can still employ large numbers of people and that isn't relying completely on just manufacturing.
great. So that's something you agree on. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay. Then for the developing countries, they're all individually quite weak and have to negotiate with much more powerful states. So how do you think they could best collaborate and protect their interests while still benefiting from the international partnerships?
Mhm.
Well, maybe I think they may look weak individually, but they may can work together on some specific issues. Their influence can become much stronger. For example, on some like climate changes or debt relief, food security, many developing countries can face some. They may face some similar changes. they can speak together through some regional organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree on the regional organizations. I think collective negotiation is obviously very important. At the same time, I think a lot of the issues that you see with these regional organizations in the global south currently is that the individual countries are not particularly willing to work with each other. It might not be like that the AU or ECOWAS has a lack of capacity. It's that it's but the other fundamental problem is that the individual governments are not willing to give the organizations capacity. So I think we need to see more competent governments that are more foresighted. I guess that's a very big problem, but yeah, like vaguely countries that are more interested in working with each other and less acting in short term self interest.
I see.
Okay.
Then how do you think organizations such as like BRICS or the Belt and Road Initiative, how do they contribute to the development of the countries? What have they achieved? And do you think these initiatives are actually helpful in addressing what the countries need?
I mean, I think as far the Belt and Road Initiative obviously has very clear results in that it has built a ton of infrastructure, which is, I mean, that's just hard progress. At the same time, I think the positives of the BRI are very much in the hard results. I don't think either of these organizations are inherently development engines. I don't think the fundamental goal of organizations such as BRICS is to develop lower income and lower middle income countries. I think it's their goals tend to be to challenge the Western Europe, United States led global order. And I think it's important for countries in the global south to recognize that they have to come up with their own way of grappling with the world order or whatever multiple world orders rather than to latching onto one side or the other.
What do you think?
Well, I think the biggest contribution of them is that they gave developing countries more choices. In the past, many developing countries mainly depend on some Western countries or some institutions for financing or trade or global roles. But now, through this kind of institutions, they have access to more funding, infrastructure projects, and also other opportunities. Yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
Okay, great. So now let's talk about the cultural dimensions and also soft power. Because in today's world, many countries in Africa or South Asia or the Middle East, they hold much greater agency and also have like growing populations. So in this context of sharpening geopolitical divides, the views of the citizens are increasingly having a like more significant influence on the outcome of strategic competition. So beyond money and trade, how do you think the US and China project their cultural influence onto the global south?
Well, I think the US and China project culture influence in different ways, of course. The US will relies more on maybe movies or music or social media, and maybe which helped spread American culture and lifestyle. Chinese influence is more connected to development experiences like tech knowledge or some educational exchanges and like some infrastructure cooperation. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely say that U.S. soft power is very much the intangible things such as music, the arts, and a lot of higher education. There's historical linkages between Africa and Europe, but also the United States in terms of university education, that type of stuff. Whereas I would say a lot of China's influence is in physical things. So you see most of the products, not that it's different in the United States, but most of the products that you see in grocery stores, or maybe not, or in like appliance stores here in Rwanda are made in China, right? Like the air conditioners, the computers, that type of stuff, and as well as hard infrastructure such as roads and anything from security cameras. I think physical things tend to be made in China. You also see some Korean or Japanese products, but it's things that you can see physically on the ground. Whereas I think U.S. influence is very much in the phones, in the music, and that type of stuff.
Then, since you have stayed in Rwanda for a long time, do you think that impacts how people there like think about the US and China? Have they talked to you about it?
I would say, I mean, I think I don't think I've had any explicit conversations about perceptions of the U.S.
Yeah.
versus China, but I think there's definitely more. I mean, in terms of casual conversation, the topics of conversation tend to be things such as the arts, sports, and music, which I think the United States and West definitely dominate in. People don't tend to talk about their air conditioner very often, but
Yeah.
I think in terms of business circles, especially when it comes to anything industrial, be
Mhm.
it like mining or stuff like that, in running a business, I think there's definitely much more emphasis on the Chinese model of companies. Of course, I do think the language barrier is important in that English and I guess European languages are much more commonly spoken in Rwanda compared to Chinese. So there is also that advantage, even in things such as business, where you'll meet very few Rwandans that speak good Chinese, and those that do are absolutely very involved in business with Chinese business people.
Uh, Then speaking of businesses, Kenny, do you observe like a trend where, Chinese businesses are trying to expand their markets towards the global south, whether in sectors like electric vehicles or renewable energy? Do you think that's creating a trend where young people are more willing to learn about the global south? Like from the conversation with your peers, do you think that creates a good youth motivation for learning more about the global south?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Do
Uh,
you observe this? It's okay.
uh,
Okay, yeah. I think
maybe we can.
it's yeah, yeah. Because I'm in
Yeah,
China too, and I think I see this trend a lot. Okay. Then what do you think, like what kinds of cultural exports can developing countries have to increase their influence on the world?
I think the very immediate obvious one is through tourism. A lot of countries that are a lot of developing emerging economies have relied on tourism to put out a national brand. Rwanda is like a good case study of that. Like the Visit Rwanda brand, as you can see them on sleeves of soccer jerseys for a lot of big European clubs, and I think that is a pretty big avenue that a lot of countries have used to bring their country to the global stage. But I think other than that, I think there are avenues definitely through you see like music in Latin America. Latin American music has taken over the world, right? But yeah, I think it depends on the place. I don't think there's a one size fits all.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Yeah, I also think they can just start from maybe their everyday life. Some use culture, food, or short videos or sports. Yeah, everything they want. Yeah, just maybe they can try these things, spread very quickly through some like social media, like TikTok or YouTube or other platforms. Yeah, to show themselves. Yeah, I think it's a great way. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then I'm gonna ask you about some of the more political dimensions. So as AI becomes increasingly important today, do you think this will widen the gap between developed and developing countries? And what opportunities or risks do you see for the global south in this new era?
Yeah, I'm definitely not an AI expert, but I think I would suspect that AI would widen the gap, at least in the short to medium term. The African continent is, I mean, in general, there's very little internet access, right? I think
Hmm.
it's very unaffordable for most people on the continent. So like using AI is out of the question, much less in using it to enable other things. Now, of course, I think that is an oversimplification. There are definitely opportunities for businesses. There is especially in Rwanda, there's a very big tech scene for sure. But I think my gut feeling is that development does not come from AI and that type of stuff. I think development comes from much more less sexy, so to speak, solutions and industries that aren't as flashy or catch headlines, but are much more practical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. And I also think that AI can both maybe widen and the gap and also create some new opportunities. And the risk is that the developed countries already have some more data or some core computer power, yeah, and also capital. And so they can continue to control more core technologies. So if countries in the global south only use tools, but not to create more things, maybe they will become more and more dependent on some developed countries. But it also that AI also brings some new opportunities. It can help more education or healthcare, some especially in places where maybe teachers or doctors or public service are limited. So for me, maybe the key question is whether the global south can take part in shaping AI. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, then if you could have a conversation with the US president about the global south, what is the one most important thing that you would say?
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd say is to, and this would be to U.S. Chinese leader, or I mean any leader, to be honest,
Yeah.
is that Africa's greatest asset, or the global south's greatest asset, is its human potential. Those are the countries with definitely like the highest birth rates, as the global north is very heavily urbanized, birth rates are declining. Yeah, like young people in the world are predominantly going to be on the African continent within a few decades. I think ultimately that will be its greatest asset, and investing in that human potential is going to pay off sooner or later.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then now, after our discussion, we can talk about what we can do as the younger generation. So, Anping, do you have any suggestions for young people like you who are interested in the global south and perhaps want to focus their career on it?
I mean, I think it's a bit early for me to be giving career advice, but I think I've really enjoyed my time in Rwanda. I think if you're interested in the global south, it doesn't make sense not to go there. So and I'm not saying, like, personally, I'm living very comfortably in Rwanda. I'm not. It's definitely, I wouldn't say I'm living in development, in so to speak. But I think it's definitely important to be in a place where development is happening. Right? You don't have to be in a rural village, but you have to. It wouldn't make sense to study development and not go to a place where there is development, right? I think even in places like DC, there's talk of development, but there isn't. You don't see what's going on the ground, and I think you lose that on a lot of perspective. So I think it's a great idea to come to places like Rwanda.
Great. Then, Kenny, have you ever been, since you haven't been to the places in the global south yet, have you been in contact with people or students from the global south? And if so, have you observed any cultural differences?
Yeah. I have been in contact with some African students studying in China at my school. So, one thing I noticed is that they often just understand development issues in a more concrete way. For example, when we talk about like infrastructure or poverty or climate changes, maybe I may think about they are more theoretically, but they sometimes just connect this issue to some their real experiences in their own country, which makes the discussion more grounded. Yeah, I also realize that many students, from the global south do not want their countries to be seen only through poverty or underdevelopment. They are very proud of their culture, food, and also language, music, and like the young people's lifestyles. Yeah.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
Then, for both of you, as the younger generation, how do you think we can push for collaboration or, help the global south?
Wow. I think. Well, I think one thing definitely to do is to engage with more types of diverse groups of people.
Yeah.
I think education, especially higher education, is really good at that. So definitely interacting with people that are very different with different cultures. I think that's a very important for fundamental understanding. And then, of course, if you're able to go to places where you are in the minority and you are very different from most people, that is also a good way. In terms of concretely helping the global south, I think it remains to be seen. If it was an easy answer for what anybody can do to help the global south, then people would be doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it starts with talking to people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why we're doing this today. So we can talk with people from the other country. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have an answer, Kenny? Or
Yeah, I agree with just maybe the first step just to understand the global south more seriously instead of just seeing it through some single words like poverty or conflict. Maybe we can just do it through some exchange programs or like internships or research or just, yeah, to try to see the different words. Yeah.
perfect.
Uh,
Okay. Thank you so much to you both. What you thought about this project? Did you learn something? And what do you think is the significance of having this kind of dialogue?
I had a really good time. I think just like hearing, as someone who is ethnically Chinese, I think I often forget that I'm very much disconnected from people in China, and that I don't, obviously I don't live there. So I think it was really great to, like, even talking about any topic really with someone that is my age actively living in China. And I think this is something that, like, it feels like a really easy thing to do, to bring people from two different countries on one screen. But everything about this is very uncommon. I feel like this is not something you see very often. It feels like something that would be in like an old TV show or something, but the people in a world where it's so easy to connect to people, I think you see it happening increasingly less and less. So I think it was a great experience.
Thank you so much. What about you, Kenny?
Yeah, of course, it's a memorable experiences and to talking with different people and to learn more knowledge. Yeah, to I think it's great and also fascinating, interesting.